There you go.
Okay.
Financial, I don't see John here. John's going to send out the financial report before the AGM next week, so he promised to do that, so we should expect that shortly. Fishing, has anybody been out freshwater fishing?
Excuse me, Dave. I just wanted to say, Sunshine, sorry, late coming in. There was nothing that we know of. And if anybody hears anything, please let us know. Pat and I were talking last night.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Dave, I can tell you about two of our members who were out fishing because I talked to them. Barry and Dale were at Durant's Lake and they had one of their best days ever, but they were not big. They were all about, I think, 10 inches.
Did they stock the lake recently?
Must have. That's
Yeah.
That's an indication they just stocked the lake.
Yeah, they usually do it about November, so that's not surprising.
Yeah, if you look at, they'll probably say, and after they stock it, about a week later, they say that you can get the date it was stocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
They-
sounds
they
like fall catchables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, we've all had days when we've been there at the right day like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, they stocked it on the 4th of November.
See?
Yeah.
When were they out there? The 5th?
Pardon?
I said, they're probably out there the 5th or the 6th, right?
Morning, everybody. Could everyone get into the link this morning? I couldn't get in.
Yeah,
Yeah, no problem.
Really?
I've been in
Anyway,
since 10 after 9, so.
John,
well,
there was a
the
message,
doesn't-
there was a message came out that there's a interference on the internet worldwide, so
Really?
may have been part of it.
Because some of my websites work and some don't.
Yeah,
The
that's what they
Golden
were saying.
Rods and Reels was one that didn't, and now I just tried it again and it did this time, so.
I think it's the color of your shirt. It was not.
Probably, Winston. It's not easy being green, you know.
Good rejoinder.
We just, anybody else on fishing, saltwater or fresh? Given the weather, it's pretty hard to sneak out on a dry day. There's enough-
Well, Tony can tell us about his expedition to Cuba.
Yeah, well, kind of some of the guys, but no, lots of fish. Nice warm weather. Probably got over the 6 days fishing, maybe 50 bonefish, about 4 juvenile tarpon, 8-foot lemon shark, numerous jacks of various species. I mean, and some really good ones in the sort of 20 to 30 pound range. Really, really strong fish. You know, and untold other species.
And any cowfish?
none of that sort of stuff.
Well,
I mean,
it's funny, one of the guys that I used to go to Cuba with, that was his dream was to catch a cowfish because apparently they're not really catchable.
No, they're not. I mean,
Do they still catch marlin there?
well, if you go off the reef, yes, but you know, we stayed mainly on the flats. I mean, the targeted species is bonefish and tarpon. But I mean, lots of huge barracuda,
Neat.
all different kinds of jacks. I caught 3 jacks that I've never caught before. Different species, Jack Trevally, yellow jacks, and a blue runner. Very pretty fish.
What kind of equipment were you using?
I used a 6-weight for the bonefish, which is a little bit underpowered for most people, but I like it. And I was using my 9-weight most of the time, but I did have a 10-weight when we really went off after the tarpon and the bigger jacks and that.
Okay.
But a very prolific fishery, not as prolific as the Seychelles, which was just mind-boggling.
So you're using fly rods?
Yeah,
Really? Okay.
yeah. I've given away most of my regular fishing gear. So then you're not allowed to fish with regular spinning gear
Oh, you're not? Oh,
in
okay.
the national park or in the Seychelles. It's 100% fly fishing.
Right. Are you in a big boat or?
Well, there's a mothership,
Mhm.
and then you take 6 little skiffs that go out daily. That's in Cuba. So 90% of your fishing is from the front of a little skiff. But in Seychelles, it's the opposite. You're probably 60% wading and 40% in the boat.
Oh, wow. And are you with a guide then?
Yeah, both places. In fact, unfortunately, well, good news, bad news. They're offering unbelievable discounts to the Seychelles right now because Seychelles imposed a travel ban on South Africa because of this new variant. So there's deals you can get 50% off going to the Seychelles if you're prepared to go in January.
Yeah, but you don't know if you're going to get back.
Well,
Yeah, that's the thing. That's true.
that's the risk you take, I guess. But it's, in my opinion, the single best saltwater fishing anywhere in the world.
Really?
Yeah, nothing comes close. Just the variety and the size of the fish.
Very good, Tony. John, you arrived just after we were talking about the financial. You're going to send out the financials just before the AGM?
You're muted, John.
John, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes.
We should have a symbol
Read
for
your lips,
muting.
but it didn't.
I'll send it out this afternoon along with the thrifty card plan. And we actually need to send out a notice of AGM, Dave, on the chat line.
Okay.
Yeah. And have we got a slate to put in the agenda? Bob?
Well, we got every position's filled except secretary. Nobody's responded, so we're just going to have to come up with something at the meeting.
Okay. Right. I mean, normally you put the slate down on the motion, the notice of the AGM.
Okay. Well, I'll send that to you, Dave.
Okay. And I'll get that out.
Okay.
Dave, there was some suggestion in the last meeting I was in before I went on my trips of dividing up the secretary position and there was some thought that 3 or 4 people would sort of take it on a
yeah, we talked about that several times, as many as 4 people sharing the load.
Right.
So doing it every 4th week. So
Right.
John Pierce and I have volunteered. We need 2 more volunteers.
Put that out on chat
Okay.
and everybody can be aware of it. for the AGM.
I can volunteer for some time too.
Okay.
Ron. Great, Ron. Would you need one more?
Perhaps you could slot me in for the second session. I'm going to start chemo in January. I don't know how I'm going to react to it, so I may not be up for it then, but should be up
Yes.
for it by March or whenever.
Okay, so you think we'll do it on a monthly basis? That's not a bad idea, actually.
A monthly, sorry, not, I would do
Sorry.
it for 4 months or 3 months.
Yeah, each person will do it for 1 month though, right? Or 3 months.
we're going to do, yeah.
Well, I'll
Not
leave it with
just-
you. I'll leave it with you guys to make a proposal at the AGM.
Okay. Yeah, let's work the details out then on the AGM.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should just maybe if we're doing that, asking for people, just what are the duties of the secretary? I think it's important to let people know what's expected.
Yeah.
I think we have it written down, don't we? Let me just see on our website.
The duties are outlined on the bylaws, which you sent out to everybody a while back.
They
Yeah,
are good.
Anyways, if anybody else is interested in the secretarial position, as we said, we're going to do a rotational basis, so it's not a encumbering thing for a lifetime.
Not a
We need-
lifetime position?
we need 4 though, for sure, because
Yeah,
I'm not
People-
prepared to do it every 3 weeks, you know, it's.
people
gotta get
travel, they have
people-
appointments, you know.
Yeah, so we need at least 1 more.
Just one thing to consider, aside from just being a scribe, the secretary can also have an important role in the leadership of the club. I mean, there are about 3 or 4 people who are key to the leadership of the club to support the president. And people should consider that as a component of the role rather than just being a scribe.
Yeah, and it's actually an important one, and people, you know, people who don't normally sit for the board, they should actually volunteer for once a month, you know.
As Ron said, they sit on the executive committee, and when we have our executive meetings, the ideas that come forward in the direction of the club are from the people at the board, so
Mhm.
they're fully participant in that.
Okay,
Okay,
Yep.
fly tying, Dave.
Yeah, I have to confirm it, but John had John Pierce had talked to me about having the next in-person at his place this coming Saturday. I'll confirm that with him today. I'll try to do that. And then on the 18th is when we do the Zoom fly tying session. And that one, I've got something in line with Florence to do. We're probably going to reprise what we're going to do the previous Wednesday, which is the 15th.
Where everybody put their go on mute except for Dave.
So I was phoning you earlier to.
Oh, that's
suggest
Colin.
Go out
Yeah.
for coffee. John was said he would be willing to go out on, say, Thursday. We could pick you up and I could pick up my little iPods if that's okay, or earpods.
Can you mute him, Dave?
All right, now. Because I haven't got a timetable, it'll depend on the weather a bit.
Colin, you sound like you're in a tunnel. You at the, you're using your phone, you're on the phone and talking.
There, he's got it fixed.
Sorry,
No,
I'm on my
just-
phone. Okay,
So,
undo. No, no.
Okay,
So-
go ahead, Dave.
I
Sorry for the interruption there.
just checking my calendar here. So,
John
Yeah.
did say he would host this coming Saturday.
which is
And-
the 11th, and then
Yeah.
on the 18th is a Zoom session, and for that session, Florence and I are going to do it. It'll be a repeat of the one we will have done on the Wednesday, the 15th, for Hague Brown. The Hague Brown one, we're going to partner with the Northern Lights Fly Fishers in Edmonton, and they're going to have somebody tie and me and so. But rather than try and prep for 2 sessions in 1 week, we're just going to reprise some of the stuff we did on Wednesday night,
And that's all on Zoom, so.
which will be tube flies for me. I don't know
okay.
what Florence. So I might expand my tube fly session because we'll have fewer tires on Saturday, and I'll show you one that the guys in Alberta would use for fishing for pike, and I'll show you one here that is a spay fly. So we'll do that, and then
Okay,
we take a break.
okay, very good, Dave. And thanks, Winston, for hosting last week.
Yes.
Dave, when is my next turn? I've only just got back from Montreal, so.
I don't know that I've got any list past Christmas, so
Okay.
let me just double
Well,
check.
just let me know,
Yeah.
because
No,
I
I
said
have
I'd
nothing.
be willing to do one a month.
Yeah, so we'll be looking for hosts after Christmas.
Okay.
And I'll do one Zoom session, Florida, and I'll do one Zoom session a month. I think we'll continue that. But if we can get hosts for in person, that would be great.
Well, John
So-
said he'd do it and I'll do it. Winston, are you up for once a month?
I've, based on your recommendation that I carry on doing it once every 6 weeks, I've got myself down for Saturday, January the 15th.
Okay.
January 16th.
Yeah.
Right.
1-5.
I'll put that in there. 15th. Right. That is there, so I'll keep that in the list. And then I would guess we'll probably do the 22nd. Will probably end up being a Zoom session.
Okay.
What's this stuff I've got on my screen here? Sick of the
Seb,
40
did you
minute-
put that up?
I don't know.
Does everybody have this?
Yep.
Yeah, I think Sep put it on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
good riddance.
Yeah, somebody did a screen share.
Yeah. Sometimes people don't know what they're doing because they're clicking as they go. Anyways, that's good, Dave. Volunteering, I don't see Bill here, and Tony just got back, so I guess that will be kind of quiet this week. Seems to me that Bill was actually out in the field doing something today. Environmental, Mick? Did you?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Just a brief report today. First of all, I'm really pleased with the caliber of guest speaker that Bob's got on groundwater, because groundwater being mainly hidden, we don't think about it very much, but it's a really important part of the hydrology of what goes on around here. So well done, Bob, to get our speaker, Mr. Way, today. Secondly, this afternoon, I'm attending a webinar on the progress of the Watershed Security Coalition, which has a steering committee of about half a dozen large groups and a membership of about 24 groups, including us. That's really further public information, research, lobbying to get more money, particularly provincial money, into our watersheds. That's been going on some time, and BC Wildlife is a leader in that particular group. And the communications, a lot of it's held by Polis, which is up at UVic. So it's an important connection in terms of sustainability of long-term funding for the kind of projects we're involved in. And about every 3 to 6 months, there's a flurry of activity. So this is part of it, a public seminar and then a members meeting in early January. This is kind of an interesting time of year. As usual, I attended the steering committee for the CC project of World Fisheries Trust and Peninsula Streams. It's that time of year when there's been an extension, but they can't keep all of the interns on, and the nature of the work changes this time of year. So they're keeping one of 3 interns going till the end of March. It's you saw the pictures of the intern during Heather Wright's presentation last week. The lucky intern is Austin. He's the young Métis guy, and he'll be on with that CC project of World Fisheries Trust and Peninsula Streams and the Halliburton Group and us until the end of March. I'm looking forward to our AGM next week. I'll be giving a brief overview of the year's activities. I think it's important that the president and the chairs reflect on the year and have some kind of ideas for next year. I've given a little more thought to our location, and I've provided information to Dave on the latest costing for holding meetings in Oak Bay, for instance, through Oak Bay Rec. It's pretty clear that it's going to be difficult to have a venue weekly. So I think one option we need to do, and maybe we can have some information brought back to the AGM, is to have Zoom three meetings a month and in person once a month, combined with an executive meeting. So I think we're going to have to be creative. I think even with COVID still going on, we do need to have a physical venue at least once a month, wherever it is and whatever time of day it is. So I'll give a fuller report on the state of the nation in terms of my position, Conservation Director, how the year has gone briefly, and where I think it can go next year. It's been a very productive year, and I'll look forward to speaking to that next week. So if there's no questions, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, thanks, Mick.
Just a quick
Social.
remark, Mick. You see that Alan Chapman has been stirring the pot again?
I haven't followed him on tracking or anything.
Okay,
But if you have a link, you can send it to me.
I'll post something to chat. He took a real shot at the way the government responded to or lack of early response to the flood issues in the Fraser Basin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And the other thing is, you saw I packaged together 3 new proposals, and I made a footnote about one other proposal to the Legacy Fund. Everybody got that less than a week ago, about 5 days ago. Barry's looked it over and he's called me a couple of times. It's my understanding the Legacy Committee is Sandy and Barry. So they'll be looking at that package, and if they have any questions further, give me a call. Thanks.
Yeah. On
Any
that
other questions, Mick?
Yeah, on that point, Mick, with regard to the Legacy Committee, Barry has phoned me a couple of days ago. I don't think he knew you were back, Sandy, but he said
I'm just back.
Yeah. So he asked me to send it out, mix, attachments to all the members. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's already gone out. I did send it to everybody.
Did you?
Yeah. I didn't just send it to Barry. I sent it to everybody because everybody's gonna need to understand it and have an opinion on it. So it's done. If it helps to resend it, just send out what I sent out 5 days ago.
That's what I was planning on doing, Mick. So I think we might as well do that. So if people have got strong feelings about it one way or another, and I'll tell you what my opinion was, that we shouldn't deplete almost the whole Legacy Fund in 1 year, because we've now, if we approve all of your requests, we've got $4,000 in commitments for this year. And personally, Mick, I want you to think about if we had to slice one, which one would you prefer to be sliced?
Yeah, I haven't met with Barry yet because I'm just back in town, but that's my feeling too, that the legacy fund is a legacy fund, not to be depleted in 1 year.
Yeah, another thing is when proposals are made, prioritization, a rating system of those proposals has to be done to rate them like 1, 2, 3, 4, so that, like John says, if we can't do all 4, then you take the first 3.
Mhm. Yeah, well, there's a very full information package there, and I'll leave it to the committee to do its job and report back to the membership. My own feeling is we're put in a position every year of being asked to make commitments. Some of those commitments may never materialize, but you have to treat them as commitments. And that's what we've done. If I was going to cut one, I'd hold back on further contribution to the net pens, but that's just my personal view on that. So let the committee do its work and come back to it. The other thing I feel personally is we're looking at ways to keep the legacy fund growing, even in small amounts, including and on a personal note, I've been at it for 8 years, and I'll be cutting back the amount of time I put in this activity. So I figure this is my last big shot at the can in terms of the legacy committee. But that's a personal thing, and the health of the legacy fund and the club is something which is very important. Not just how I spend my personal time, but I will be cutting back next year, even though I'll retain the conservation director position.
Okay.
Barry and I will meet and discuss this as soon as we're able to get together.
Great, thank you.
On another note around conservation, I got a call this just the other day from about the Elk Lake Advisory Committee, and the woman was very apologetic because she forgot to send Dave and I the invite to the meeting and the stuff.
I read the minutes.
Yeah, until hours before the meeting, basically. So needless to say, we weren't able to go to it. At least I wasn't.
I couldn't either.
I'd be interested, if you wouldn't mind forwarding me the minutes. I think it's appalling that they ask us to find representatives. We help them try and find other representatives, like from Hague Brown, and then they're so effing inept that they can't invite you to the meeting. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's true.
I actually went back and looked and see, did I miss something? Yeah,
No.
I did a search.
I went through a whole rigmarole getting you guys signed up and helping them to reach another club. So it's just par for the course. I just cannot believe what goes on in the CRD administration.
Anyways, we got a speaker. Social. Bob?
Well, no change, the Chinese New Year dinner is the next one, and there's no reason why that's not going to happen. So Bill, Thomas and I will look after that, and we'll check in the new year.
Okay, thanks. The library, Sandy, you just got back, but
the books are stored at my place, but it's at this stage, I would say it's pretty dormant.
Yeah.
There's Colin said that nobody was coming even when it was closer in. So I'm a storage facility for them right now.
We may have to make a decision on what we do with the library going forward, because if we don't have space, we can't expect people to store them And basically that's how it is. People don't seem to be using it. At Collins, he might have had 10 people in a year borrow a book. So it's, I think when you have a place to go to, the books are there, you look through them and you may take one home.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll have to think about that long term.
Dave, could I give you a message from Bill
Yes,
regarding the premises?
yes.
He says he's been approached several times by Esquimalt anglers offering to put us up there on a weekly basis. They would install a chair climber if we want it, which I think we do. And I think we'd probably have to kick in for that. But the actual meeting costs would be negligible. I think we just got to pay for the heat and light that we use, basically. So
Yeah, I
we
think
should
we got to
scope
come
out
to
that.
terms. Okay, I
So
think we got to come to terms with where we're going to meet, and we got to do that soon. So I've been to Esquimalt anglers a number of times. What I have done though is I've reached out to the suggestions that Jim did, and I'm going to look at the other premises and then at the AGM talk about where we go to move forward.
okay.
I think the Esquimalt anglers is a pretty good solution. They do have a handicap accessibility issue, but if they're willing to address it, it might be good. But anyways, I'll try to lay out, if I can meet before next week with everybody, I'll try to lay out my findings and say, here's a recommendation to move forward, because I think without a location, it's very difficult as an organization because we are a social club.
And we haven't checked out the Gorge Soccer Club premises either.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I've reached out, but I haven't heard back. But I heard back from the Gordon Head Lawn Bowling Association, and I have some dates. If you want to come look at the premises with me, John, I'll let you know the dates.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I'm trying to do this between my appointments.
Yes.
Anyways, so.
I see the speakers joined us, Dave.
Okay, do you want to talk about the speaker, Bob?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Nice to see you here. It's Mike Wee. He's going to be speaking on groundwater, our hidden treasure. And this is from the Department of the School of Earth and Ocean Sciences. So Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself and give us a bit of a background on who you are and why you're interested in groundwater resources.
Yeah. Just before you start, Mike, are you okay with us recording this?
I'm okay with you recording it.
Yeah, you're recording now.
I can share the screen.
Yep,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm a fellow fisherman, avid fisherman. Didn't even know you guys existed. I'm mostly, I would think, fly fishing for trout and salmon on the beach and in the lakes and rivers. Probably what I have done so far. Not a lot of deep sea fishing because I don't have a boat. A little bit about myself. I've been working as a hydrogeologist for, well, close to 40 years. 36 of those were with the Ministry of Environment. As a scientist / policy person, helping to manage and monitor the groundwater resource in BC. And then near the end of my career, had the privilege to work with others to develop the Water Sustainability Act that finally brought licensing of groundwater use into British Columbia. I've retired for 3 years now, since 2018, trying to get my fishing days up slowly, and but I do consult part-time, and I do teach at UVic the hydrogeology course, and I guess I volunteered to be on the Speakers Bureau to share my passion of groundwater, and your club contacted me. So here I am.
You may want to look at our website to see what we do.
I did see that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty broad.
yes, so,
Mike, I'm Dennis Gedney. If you're interested in fly fishing off the beach, etc., please get in touch with me directly.
Okay. Thank you.
we have all kinds of outings as seniors, and we do a wide spectrum of fishing. And those that don't have a boat get together and go out on some outings. So
Okay,
it really
that'd be
works
good to know.
well if you divide the cost by 4 or 3 or whatever you want. So anyways, go for it.
Okay, so maybe I'll share my screen. And can you all see the, I guess, the title of the PowerPoint there
Yep,
with the
looks
sand
good.
Yeah,
cliff there? Okay, I'm going to go into slideshow mode. And what is it, 10:13? Yeah, so it won't be about fishing today, unfortunately. It'll be about the other passion of mine, which is the water that's hidden in the ground, which this talk is entitled Our Hidden Treasure. I'm with the School of Earth and Ocean Sciences at the University of Victoria, and that's my name and my license to practice. So I'm hoping maybe for the next 45 minutes, I don't know your backgrounds. There's obviously an interest in water. I don't know how many of you know much about groundwater, but I'm going to assume you know very little. So forgive me if that's not the case. And I'm going to, number one, talk about the importance of groundwater. Why am I passionate about it? And why would I like to support other people to get passionate about it? And then I'd like to talk about the responsibility over the resource. And that includes both water in a stream, but also water in the ground. And then introduce some concepts about where groundwater occurs, the types of aquifers that we have. And that's a new term that some of you may not have used a lot in the past. I'll dip a little bit into the groundwater chemistry. And then I'll step back out and talk about how this province and us as citizens participate in the managing of this resource. And I'll focus principally on the Water Sustainability Act, which took effect in 2016. And then I'll have a slide on information if you're interested further into this topic, and then some takeaways and questions. Okay. And feel free to ask questions as we go along, or if there's something that's not clear, do put a question in chat or just unmute yourself. But I wanted to, many of you have probably seen a diagram like this on the upper left, which shows the blue arrows as water basically traveling through different aspects of the earth. And so water in the ocean evaporates, forms clouds, clouds get moved by winds. And when they hit the mountains on our coast, they got to rise and lighten up their load, and it'll rain and snow. And that rain and snow will eventually run off and either go back into a lake or a stream. But surprisingly, quite a bit of it actually seeps into the ground and travels as groundwater flow, either back into the lakes or the stream or back directly to the ocean, depending on where that water is. It's part of the global and local hydrologic cycle, and groundwater is just one form of water that occurs, like rainwater and snow and water in a lake and a stream. And groundwater flow is just one way that is the way that water in the ground flows to move along that hydrologic cycle. And so when you look at BC, or you look at, most places in our neighborhood, you can look at the Cowichan River and the ocean and the Fraser River and realize surface water, there's a lot of it. But what we don't realize is there's a heck of a lot of groundwater underneath our feet. And so if you were to divide up all the water in the world and wrap that water around the globe, ocean and seawater would probably stack up to about 2.5 kilometers in height. You would drown the earth with that amount of salt water. And if you look at lakes and reservoirs and river channels, they might add up to a depth of 0.25 or 0.3 meters of water around the globe, a foot of water. If you were to take all the water in the rivers and the lakes and just put it on the surface of the earth, it would add up to about a foot, or 0.25 or 0.3 meters. Groundwater would probably stack up to about 120 meters in height, twice as much as what glaciers and ice caps would stack up if you were to melt it and spread it like butter all around the globe, right? So there's a tremendous volume of groundwater underneath the earth compared to, say, surface water. But the difference is the residence time of groundwater is much slower. If you look at that table, it takes weeks to thousands of years for water to cycle itself through the ground, whereas lakes and streams, it might take weeks to years, right? Depending on how big the lake is and how fast the stream is flowing. Residence time is really just the volume divided by the flow rate. And so water through surface water moves quicker through the system than groundwater. So while there's a lot of groundwater, it doesn't move all that fast. And so that's an interesting fact. And here's some more interesting facts. I guess, what is groundwater? Well, groundwater is really water that occurs underneath the ground. So if you were to dig wherever you're living here in Victoria, you might dig and find that you have some soil. And if you look in a microscope, some of the pores in that soil might be filled with water, indicated by the blue, but a lot of that soil pore is filled with gases, air, right? And so that soil is only partially saturated. It's mostly unsaturated. But as you dig deeper, you might get into a layer of soil where all the pores are wet. They're all saturated. And then you start getting into the saturated zone. In the first few centimeters, half a meter of soil, maybe a lot of that water that's in the pores is actually held under tension, much like water in a paper towel is held under tension when you dip it into a bathtub or a sink and the water wicks up into it. That's the capillary fringe. Below that, water is under atmospheric or even under positive pressure. Then you get into the real groundwater zone or saturated zone. And in this saturated zone, all the pores would be filled with groundwater. Or in Victoria, if you dig into rock, you might get fractures like this, and the fractures may be filled with water, right? So that's where groundwater occurs. So yeah, it's all good, Mike, but why do we really care? Well, number one, we care because many communities in BC rely on groundwater as a source of supply. You just have to go up to Mill Bay, to Duncan, to Parksville, to Qualicum Beach, and all of those communities are fed by groundwater, right? I mean, the CRD is mostly fed by the Souk Reservoir, but if you go to Willis Point or Souk and Machosen, many of those places are on wells, right? So number one, it's a source of supply, and not only for drinking water. In BC, groundwater pumped out of wells is mostly used to support our economy. Pulp and paper mills, mineral processing, fish hatcheries. It's a lot of, it's an economic driver. Whereas in Quebec and the Yukon, for example, most of the groundwater pumped out of there is used for drinking water, right? The other thing is that groundwater is a constant temperature. Here in Victoria, probably around 9 or 10 degrees is the temperature. And that cold temperature and the fact that it flows into streams provides cold base flow to stream. So, you know, obviously in July and August in the Cowichan River, fish are going to stack up in pools where you have cold groundwater coming into them, right? And not in the hotter parts of the river where you don't have groundwater coming in. So it provides base flow, it moderates temperature, and groundwater is more mineralized than surface water. And those minerals help buffer, protect fish from getting diseases. So it's not, water's healthy, but it's healthy because also it's cool and it's mineralized. The other thing important about groundwater is it's a geological agent. And so during this last 3 atmospheric rivers that came to BC, a lot of that water, that rain, seeped into the ground and caused those landslides, right? And that's because when water enters into the ground, the water pressure builds up and the weight of that soil mass becomes less and it slides. You also get groundwater fossilizing dinosaurs, like in Alberta, or forming mineral deposits. So groundwater is a geologic agent as well as a source of use. Any questions so far?
I have one, Mike. In salmon fishing, I noticed that the most productive spots are always where small creeks enter, especially in August when the Chinooks are on the way back to the river bounce. And I think you just answered my question. I guess that small amount of creek coming into a small bay would create some colder water and possibly some minerals that they're looking for. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I can't answer your question specifically, whoever asked that, but you know, where a tributary stream comes into a main stem, there's usually the tributary, but there's probably also gravels and sand deposited, you know, at the mouth of that tributary, right? And while some of that water is coming from the tributary stream, other water is coming as groundwater through that fan, right? So there's sometimes when you walk barefoot over these, the gravels, you know, like I had one time, long time ago at Lightning Lake in Manning Park with my daughter, I found that the bottom of the tops of those gravels, the water was very cold. And I think it's groundwater seeping through the gravel into Lightning Lake. And this was actually where the bridge crosses the lake and there's a tributary stream there. But in addition to the stream is a gravel fan with groundwater flowing into it, right? So, yeah. So that's all well and good, but that water needs to be managed. And who manages it? And every province and every jurisdiction in Canada affirms that they have the responsibility over the management and protection of water resource. And so this table right here is a table I summarized. If you look at all the legislation in the different jurisdictions across Canada, they all say, for example, in Alberta, the right to use all water is vested in the province of Alberta. The right to use all surface and groundwater vested in Saskatchewan. Nova Scotia, the right to use water in a water course, including groundwater, is vested in the province. Yukon, Commissioner of the Water Board has administration and control over all rights in respect to water in the Yukon. So some of that currently is being challenged by Indigenous nations across BC. And that's all part of the landscape. But the legislation, as British Columbia affirms, is the right to use water in a stream and groundwater is vested in the province of British Columbia. So part of this is messaging to the federal government that this is a natural resource that the province manages, not the feds. This is also a message to residents and citizens that groundwater and water in a stream is a common pool resource that belongs to all British Columbians and not just to anybody who owns land over it or property adjacent to it, right? Like a stream. So those are the kind of messages that the province asserts in their legislation. And the federal government has interest in transboundary waters like the Great Lakes or the Columbia River and ocean waters. And they also have a lot of good scientists that help us study some of the groundwater in the nation, right, including BC. And they have jurisdiction over federal lands like military bases, that kind of thing. But it's important to remember that it's a common resource and there is some jurisdiction claiming the lead to managing it, because a lot of users feel, I drilled the well, I put the pump in the well, I brought the power to the well, it's my water. But the province claims differently. It's a common pool resource. And so managing groundwater use in Canada probably began as early as the time when I was born, 1959. Surface water use has been regulated for 100 years, probably 50, 60 years before that time. But I guess as provinces, as Canada came out of the Second World War, provinces developed more capacity and confidence. It started to assert its jurisdiction over allocating groundwater, right? So this is a map showing all of Canada and when licensing of groundwater use came into effect. And you can see BC is the last jurisdiction to do so back in 2016. My speculation of that, and I'm sure you guys will understand being fishermen that we speculate a lot, is that through our political turmoil of the 1990s and 2000s, government of the day forgot about water and managing it. They were just politically trying to survive. Okay, that's all in terms of the jurisdiction stuff. I'm going to get into some of the more scientific technical stuff. And then at the end, we'll get, and then we'll get back out to the management part at the end. So I'm going to use terms, hydrogeologists use terms like aquifers a lot. And an aquifer is really a Latin-based term that means a geological unit, like a deposit of sand and gravel, or even fractured rock that is saturated, filled with water, groundwater, that's permeable and is able to yield useful quantities of water to us. So if you were on Salt Spring Island and you drilled a well, you'd probably encounter rock, which is kind of permeable, it is saturated, and you can then divert that water from your well for domestic use. That rock would be an aquifer. Or you could be down at Goldstream Park by the riverbank and drill a shallow well into the gravel there and hit groundwater and probably pump lots of it out and use it for your hatchery. That would be an aquifer, right? Royal Bay, you can see all that development happening over that sand and gravel. Underneath that is groundwater. It's an aquifer. And so this diagram here, which looks more like a layered chocolate cake than anything else, we call it layer cake geology, shows that some aquifer occur at shallow depths. The top is the water table, and others occur at deeper depths, and they might be confined by clays or hardpan or till. And these confining beds are called aquitards. They retard the movement of water. They're a geological deposit like silt and clay and till that are not so permeable and does not yield quantities of water for use, right? So next slide, I'm going to group these aquifers into different broad types, and then we'll talk about some of them around where we live. So there are aquifers that are unconsolidated, that the material would crumble in your hand if you were to hold it, and they would be sand and gravel. They are traditionally, typically, the unconsolidated materials that form aquifers. That picture you see here is of the UBC cliffs. You'll see similar cliffs up in Parksville and Sunshine Coast. And these cliffs are, these are fine to medium sand that was deposited prior to and during the last ice age. And when they're buried, they hold groundwater. And this is the type of sand that actually provides water to the city of Qualicum Beach and Parksville. Okay. And then you have aquifers that are consolidated. They don't crumble in your hand. And in our area, they're mostly fractured rock, like this picture on the right. And you can see these rocks have cracks in them. And some of these cracks, when they daylight on this highway, water's spilling out of them, right? So that's groundwater from a fractured bedrock aquifer. So two main types based on materials. And then they're further divided into whether they're covered or whether they're not. So an aquifer that's uncovered, unconfined, where the water table is the top, that forms the upper boundary. They're called unconfined aquifers. And deeper ones that are confined by aquitards are called confined aquifers. Now, why I bring that up is because when you have human settlement on top here and industry, these unconfined aquifers are way more vulnerable to pollution than a confined aquifer would be, right? So in terms of city planning, knowing where these aquifers are is important, but knowing whether they're more vulnerable or less vulnerable is as important in terms of protecting that water, especially if you're diverting it, you know, out of wells to feed your population, or they contribute to stream flow, right? Still looking at it kind of conceptually or schematically, if you were to look at where we live and fish, you could look and see this might be a Gulf Island right here. Maybe it's Galliano, or maybe it's Gabriola. Over here, this is a river. This may be the Souk River. This may be the Cowichan River. This may be Nile Creek, right? And so the floodplain associated with the Cowichan River, the Souk River, the delta associated with Nile Creek, these are aquifers, sand and gravel aquifers, unconfined. You might up around Comox and even in Colwood, you might have a dump of sand and gravel. It might be saturated at some depth. These are unconfined sand and gravel aquifers. These are formed by rivers along the river and at its mouth. This is probably formed at the end of the last ice age when ice was melting at a tremendous pace. And a lot of the gravel and sand were dumped in glacial rivers to form a ridge, a deposit, and people drill wells into them. And then on Vancouver Island and the coast, mainland, you'll probably find a lot of areas are covered by till. And in some areas where the sediments are thick enough, there may be sand, some gravel underneath the till, and these are unconfined. These are confined sand and gravel aquifers that form important deposits. And you might even find sand and gravel that are older than that, but where these exist, they're not very well known, or these deposits may have been destroyed by the glaciers and reworked to form younger aquifers. And then if you live in the highlands, if you live in the Chosen, you might be drilling into volcanic or metamorphic rocks and get your water there. And so that's another type of aquifer. Or if you live in the Saanich Peninsula, you may run into granitic rocks. And that's another type of aquifer there. These blue arrows basically show direction of groundwater flow. And you can see in bedrock, I've made the arrows a little bit jagged just to show they flow through fractures. These flow through pores. And then these blue and white lines show maybe where below it salt water occurs, right? Because we live on the coast. Any questions so far about groundwater, aquifers in relation to where we live? Okay, so in the next few slides, I'm going to profile 4 really prominent types of aquifers. The ones that occur along floodplains is number 1. The ones that occur underneath hardpan or till is number 2. The ones that occur on the Gulf Islands in sedimentary rock, number 3. And then the ones that occur ubiquitously up and down Vancouver Island, wherever hard rock occurs, is number 4. Let's go to number 1. Many of you who have driven to Duncan and north to go fish, you probably have driven over this aquifer. It's when you come down the hill and then you cross the Coxsila River and you go to those butcher shop and delicatessen markets. I'm gonna stop this. That's the Cowichan Aquifer, the lower part of it. It comprises recent sand and gravel and deposited by the river. Just excuse me, I'm going to turn off the printing machine. Sorry about that. My wife's upstairs printing and the printer's in my room. This aquifer comprises sand and gravel sediments deposited by the Cowichan River and partly by the Coxsila. It's highly permeable. You could see from the drill core, it's mostly robin-sized, egg-sized gravel, coarse sand. It supplies water to the city of Duncan. It supplies water to the Vancouver Island Trout Hatchery that stocks all of our local lakes. And it supplies the Cowichan Tribes salmon hatchery as well. The federal hatchery run by Cowichan Tribes. The flow in that aquifer is pretty rapid. It's extremely permeable, excellent quality. Duncan, the city, has won historically many drinking water prizes for its water. It's also highly vulnerable to pollution because it's unconfined and it's shallow. And the thing about this aquifer and these types of aquifers is that they're highly connected, hydraulically connected to the local stream. And so during the summertime, in fact, during times when it's not raining, when the river level goes back down, a lot of that water during low flow is fed by groundwater flowing into it. So the aquifer is a major source of the river is a major source of recharge to this particular aquifer. And as the river flows, the groundwater becomes a major source of water for the river as well. The aquifer provides base flow to streams during dry weather, and pumping from the city of Duncan's wells, the trout hatcheries wells, the salmon hatchery wells, and other wells that are in this aquifer can and does deplete stream flow of the Cowichan. So fortunately, the ministry, the provincial government has monitoring wells drilled into this aquifer. And this is one of the longer standing wells showing water level in the well below ground on the vertical axis and the decades on the horizontal axis. And you can see prior to 2000, they were manually measured. And after that, data loggers was put into the well to measure the fluctuations. And you could see, number one, that the water level, groundwater level here in this well, which is near, I think near the Silver Bridge, is only about 1 meter or 2 below ground. So pretty similar to the river level. It fluctuates up and down exactly like the river level, peaking in the winter and lowering in the summer. And the third thing you see is it's been going down for about 20 years and then starting to flatten out again. I'm just going to go from there, going to click on this icon and go to this aquifer a little bit more in detail. I won't be doing that for the other ones, but you can get these fact sheets online. But if you look at this aquifer, the province produces fact sheets on each of these aquifers that they've mapped, and they've mapped over 1,200 of them across the province. This is called Aquifer 186. It's the lower Cowichan River aquifer. So there are other sand and gravel deposits further upstream, but they're different aquifers. This one, as you get to the Allenby Bridge, bedrock starts to outcrop and the sand and gravel eventually pinches out. And so the aquifer boundaries defined by the floodplain deposits abuts up to the cliffs, rock cliffs up here, and then abuts up to the uplands here, just west of Cobble Hill. And the floodplain deposits actually go a little bit up the Coxsila River, but then after that, the deposits become very narrow to non-existent. So this is the aquifer. These are all the wells that are in it. And Obswell 204 is just east and downstream of the Silver Bridge, where a lot of the pumping is going on. And so this fact sheet tells you where this aquifer is located in BC, tells you the aquifer boundaries, it tells you the observation wells that are there, tells you the wells that are registered in the government's database. It gives you a bit of a description of the aquifer, and then it tells you what the yields are, and it can yield up to 200 liters per second. It's pretty productive. Its median or average yield is about 2 liters per second. Water depth is pretty shallow, median of 2.4 meters. And you don't have to drill very deep to get water, median of 10 meters or 30 feet. So it gives you some stats and attributes about the aquifer. And then if there is an observation well, it'll plot it. And here you can see the groundwater, median groundwater level on a month-to-month basis follows the weather pattern. And as you get to September, when the rains start to come, the river levels, the groundwater levels start to rise again, right? And then starts to fall around March and April. And then when you get to July and August, it's so low, so little base flow go into the river that the river's not fishable anymore. This is the same hydrograph that I showed. And this is another observation well. This one may be a little bit more affected by pumping. So some of the signals are more natural and some of the signals are more weird because something else is going on, like pumping. And so we'll get to some of those pumping signals later on, but I'm going to stop with this one and go back to the PowerPoint. Any questions about the lower Cowichan River before I move on to the next river? Okay, so the next one is the Quadra Sand. And this is the stuff you find in Parksville and at UBC. And so about 30,000 years ago, the world went into an ice age, and about 18,000 years ago, when we look at these panels, 4 panels of BC, ice started in the mountaintops, started flowing down to sea level. And by about 20,000 years, it reached the Strait of Georgia and started coming down the Strait of Georgia to Puget Sound. And when the ice came down the Strait of Georgia, it's not like it's freezing all the time. There is a summer and a winter, and there is freeze and thaw, but not so much as today. And so you get melting of the ice at the front and deposition of sand by the glacial rivers. And as this ice worked its way down the Strait of Georgia, it deposited in front of it fine, medium sand, because the rivers weren't running that high because it was really cold, not a lot of energy. And then above the sand, the glacier rode over it and deposited till. So you'll often find this fine medium sand underlying till. This is the quadra sand. It occurs all along the spots in east coast of Vancouver Island. It's mostly sand deposited by meltwater streams about 20 to 15,000 years ago. It occurs at lower elevations on the east coast of Vancouver Island. It's permeable, it's productive, supplies water to some of the wells in Cobble Hill, to Parksville, to Qualicum Beach, and those are just some examples. Its flow is good, its quality is good. It's much less vulnerable to pollution because it's got this till covering most of it. It still can provide water to local creeks like French Creek, because some of these creeks have down cut and exposed the sand and allowed the groundwater to come in. Okay. Third type is this, I'm going back up to the top here, top right, this sedimentary formation that lies pretty much on the east coast of Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands. It's sedimentary bedrock. It looks like this. It's layered with sandstone, mudstone, conglomerates, and it's fractured. And so these sedimentary bedrock underlie lower elevations in the east coast of Vancouver Island and Gulf Islands. They're somewhat permeable. They provide water for residences, small subdivisions, businesses, and farms, but not much more than that. But it's still called an aquifer. Its vulnerability depends on whether clays or tills overlie the bedrock or not. And its limited storage means it generally recovers every year. But one other thing, it has slower flow. Its quality is generally not as good because the water is spending a lot of time in the sedimentary rock, and it's dissolving limestone and gypsum. And the water is usually kind of mineralized, kind of rotten egg smelling, but it's usable, right? And so when we look at observation well 327 on Galliano, you can see similar things, depth to water, and over the decades. And one thing you'll notice is the water level in the ground in these bedrock wells fluctuate over 10 meters, right? Huge fluctuations. And that's because the porosity of these rocks are really low. And so all you have to do is spit on the rock and it'll fill back up again. So it doesn't take a lot of rain. In fact, it only takes a few storms for the groundwater to top up every single winter. But it's not the winter that the problem comes. It's the summer when you get that heavy population, summer population, and no rain. And so while it tops up and everything seems fine every year, it's really the summer level that you got to realize that's when the stress comes in, right? So the last profile here is of fractured crystalline bedrock, hard rocks, metamorphic igneous rocks. And you can see this particular observation well, 240, is in the Saanich Peninsula, is drilled into this purple stuff. Well, there's purple stuff and light purple stuff just about everywhere you go on Vancouver Island. These are fractured rock. Fracture permeability is moderately low, but it supplies water for residences, small subdivisions, and farms. Generally lower flow, but the quality of the water is actually pretty good because granite metamorphic rocks don't dissolve as much as sedimentary rocks do. And the vulnerability depends on what's overlying it. And the limited storage means groundwater recovers very quickly. So this is a graph that my mentor developed in 1979, 1980s. Probably the last time the Canadians and the Maple Leafs were competitive in the NHL. So it was a long time ago. Vertical axis is depth to water. And this is the groundwater level. These are barometric pressures and tides, and this is the rainfall, daily rain precipitation. And you could see at the end of November, when the first Pineapple Express starts to come, water starts to rise. And then once you get over about 10, 20, 30 millimeters of rain, like the heavy rains we have experienced recently, the groundwater rapidly rises up to the top. And then you get these few days of no rain, water level starts to go down, the next rain comes, and so on. And so managing the supply, what you can have the groundwater level topped up in December, but if you have if the rest of your winter is really dry, it'll start to drain earlier and reach a lower point by August. Whereas if you have rainfall going all the way into March and April, then you'll have more water draining to a later summer, right? So a lot of our supplies in these rocks are dependent on whether we get this later winter rains to keep this level up for as long as possible before it starts to drop. And it drops because temperatures are going up, plants are growing, there's evaporation, there's transpiration, and there's no more atmospheric rivers coming our way, right? So while the myth here is we get our water from Mount Baker or from the Olympics or further up island from Mount Washington, in reality, it's from the local rain that falls. We could track it with the rainfall. How am I doing for time?
No, we're okay, Mike.
Okay. I don't have many slides left, but so those are the 4 principal types of aquifers that we have where we live. Many people depend on them. They all have their different characteristics. They have different characteristics that define and govern how sustainable they are, right? Bedrock, you spit at it, it recovers, but that's not the point. The point is how late is your rain and how much are people drawing on it in the summertime. For others like the Cowichan River, there's lots of water in that aquifer, but if you pump too much, you're really affecting the stream. So it is the stress on that stream that dictates the limit to how much you can take out, even though there's a ton of water. You could dry the Cowichan River up and still get lots of water out of that aquifer. But our society has moved to the point where river flows in that river is important, and that limits how much you can take out of the aquifer. So let's get a little bit into the chemistry. Nearly all groundwater in BC originates from rain and snow locally. And that rain and snow will eventually infiltrate into the soil and into the underlying deposits. Rain and snow does not have a lot of minerals in it. So if you were to dry up a liter of rain and weigh the amount of minerals in it, the total dissolved solids, you might get 5 or 10 milligrams per liter. And rainwater and snow is slightly acidic, as it has a pH of just under 7, like 6.5. Groundwater, on the other hand, has a total dissolved solids of tens to hundreds of milligram per liter. If you were in the prairies or further inland, it may even reach the thousands, right? But our water is nicely mineralized and slightly basic, like 7, 7.5. And on the Gulf Islands, it may reach 8, 8.5, even 9. And I don't know if you've gone to the Gulf Islands and felt some of that basic groundwater. It actually has a bit of a slippery feel to it. But whether it's tens of milligram per liter or hundreds, groundwater typically comprises these following major chemicals: calcium, magnesium, sodium and potassium counted as one, chloride, sulfate, and bicarbonate. These are quite easily dissolvable and make up most of the chemical constituents in our water. So as water moves through the soil, through the geological deposit, is no longer exposed to the air. And with the lack of air, water gains the ability to dissolve minerals from sediments and bedrock. So mineral content increases, hardness from lime, gypsum, but you also get minute chemicals like iron and manganese that stain your fixtures, fluoride up at Yellow Point, areas like that, that can mottle your teeth, and arsenic, like in the Sunshine Coast, that can be toxic and cancer causing. And then some of them, you have this ubiquitous rotten egg smell, which is not pleasant. Groundwater can also be contaminated by gas stations, intensive farming, industrial development, and even septic. And I'm going to point you to this site if you're on well water. Important to test water in your well, and HealthLink BC gives some advice on how homeowners can test their water. These are graphics that I took from my study area in Grand Forks. This is the Kettle River. This is Grand Forks. This is the Granby River confluencing with it and then continuing to flow eastward and then back into the States. This is the total dissolved solids of the groundwater in Grand Forks, and Grand Forks is supplied by well water. And you could see areas near the Kettle River, less than 100 milligram per liter. In areas farther away, 500 or 600 milligram per liter, right? So the water becomes very hard once you move away from the Kettle River. In fact, this change in chemistry reflects that the Kettle River heavily recharges the aquifer, and over here, the aquifer in return goes back to the Kettle River. So the influence of the surface water on groundwater chemistry is quite obviously here. But part of this dark spot over here, where it's greater than 700 milligram per liter, this is mostly from fertilization of farmland for growing potatoes, carrots, vegetables. This is an area where nitrate is well above drinking water limit. Here along the coast, if we pump too much, we can also draw in salt water, right, along the coast, and cause our pumped water to become saltier and saltier over time. This is called saltwater intrusion. It can happen laterally, like along the estuary of the Cowichan River, or it could happen by upconing when you have a deep vertical well, let's say on the Gulf Islands, away from the coast, but you know there's saltwater underlying the island, right? Questions?
Mike, you said it was a fallacy that Elk Lake gets its fresh water from the Mount Baker, which I've heard numerous times, even by people who drill wells.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it. I think it's a fallacy because if you're on Hornby Island, people will say their water comes from Mount Washington. If you're in Abbotsford, people will say their water comes from Mount Baker, because they look at the obvious signs of water, the overwhelming sign of water, and say that's where it's coming from. And it's cold, right? Groundwater is cold, but it doesn't. We've been monitoring these aquifers for almost a half a century. We've tracked their precipitation within the watershed. It pretty much correlates with local precip.
Where does the water come from for Elk Lake then? In a freeze up, there's always a spot in the middle that is free of ice. We've had on our club, we've had fellows who had underwater cameras showing quite a mountain where it appears groundwater is coming up, and there's lots of fish around that particular spot. So the Elk Lake's getting water from somewhere. Where's it coming from?
Well, you could use a topography map and look at the mouth of Elk Lake, the outlet of Elk Lake, and draw the watershed around it. And that's where your water is contributing it from, right? So anything that lands within that watershed will flow downhill. Maybe some of it will seep into the ground, and groundwater a lot of it is topographically driven, the flow. it'll flow towards a low point, which is the lake, right? See, if it did come from Mount Baker, you would think that water would be crystal clear. And Elk Lake is anything but crystal clear.
Well, I think it gets polluted a lot from the Halliburton Hill on the east side of the lake. You get all that pollution runoff. But the
Yeah,
fact is
and-
that there's a place in there that doesn't freeze in the middle. Even
So-
when I've, in my younger years, seen cars driven on the lake, there was always a spot in the middle that didn't freeze. I wondered why. And
So that's the clue, right? If you think it's coming from all that land use over there, it's not coming from Mount Baker. Because if it was, you wouldn't have a problem. And if it was, you don't control the flow. The Americans do, right? And the evidence that we've collected over the years have not shown that to be the case, right? Okay.
I have a question, Mike. The previous slide, it had TDS. What does that stand for?
Where did I
No,
have?
the one before that, I think.
TDS?
TDS.
TDS is the total dissolved solids in water. It's the minerals that are remaining. If you took a liter of water and you dried it up and all the minerals crystallized and you weighed that, that would be the total dissolved solids that's in the water.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a measure of how mineralized the water is. So I'm going to step back out. Oh, the other thing is if your water from your Souk Reservoir actually came from Mount Baker, then surely access to the Souk Reservoir shouldn't be restricted. You should be driving, camping, and building all over that reservoir because the water is actually coming from Mount Baker, right? Well, that's not what the CRD believes, right? They believe the water coming to the Souk Reservoir are water that's being shed directly from the neighboring hills, right? So I'm going to step back to managing because this is all really nice, but then the Hatfields and the McCoys don't bring their shotgun out because it's all nice. There are conflicts, right? So in British Columbia, the use of water, whether it's in a stream or in a lake or in groundwater, is based on seniority. Is based on a concept called first in time, first in right. And it was a concept developed by the settlers as they moved from Eastern North America into the drier Western North America, and they would run into droughts. It was also a way to help promote investment in development of land so that the person that was here first making beneficial use of the water and has put in all the effort to build the dikes, drilled the wells, they should get senior access to that water. And British Columbia, being a Western province, adopted that with the gold miners. And so senior users have priority over junior users when there isn't enough to go around. Now that used to just apply to water in a stream and a lake. But in 2006, the Water Sustainability Act included groundwater in that. And so a user's priority is based on their date of precedence in their water license. And the date of precedence of the different users can be considered together when the sources are connected. So this is the Dead Man River north of Kamloops. And let's say there were 3 people in green dots here diverting water from the stream to irrigate or to use for their homestead. But there were also users here with the orange circles that have drilled wells. And this floodplain here is made of sand and gravel, and it's hydraulically connected to the Dead Man River. In the past, if flow in the Dead Man River went low, they would shut off the 1993 user because he's the most junior. And if that wasn't enough, they would cut off the 1946 user before they cut off the 1898 water rights holder. Our water rights go back quite a ways. But with groundwater licensing now being part of the act, if there wasn't enough water in the stream and they knew the groundwater here was connected to the stream water, they would cut off the 2010 well user and the 1971 and the 1976 well user. They would cut off the 1993 stream user first, right, before groundwater licensing. But when you consider all the rights together, if there wasn't enough water in the stream, they would cut off the 2010 groundwater user and then the 1993 surface water user, and then see if they need to cut off the 1976 well user, the 1971 well user, to protect the flows in the stream. So water use, whether you're on a connected aquifer or the stream, the rights would be looked at together, and the cutoff would be based on seniority. So the Water Sustainability Act came in almost 6 years ago. All non-domestic groundwater users require a license. So prior to the act in 2016, groundwater users use that water based on common law right. If you drilled it, you found it, and you can pump it, it's yours. But the act changed that. So we no longer have common law rights to groundwater. They're statutory rights, license rights. And so all the historical groundwater users that have relied upon common law access to groundwater have until March of 2022 to apply for a license to get their common law rights converted to a statutory right and get their seniority recognized. If they apply after that time, they will lose all their seniority. So the deadline's March 1st, and so far the uptake has been very low, especially for small private businesses who don't have the capacity or the understanding for water rights. The oil and gas people have done it, have applied. The mining people have done it. The water bottling people have done it. All the people that have some sort of public or corporate accountability and capacity have likely all applied to be legitimate. But ranchers, small farmers, Kung Pao Chicken Restaurant on Fraser Highway, that's on a well, they may not even realize this is a requirement.
It doesn't apply to domestic, does it?
No, if you're a private domestic well, you have a right deemed in the act itself.
Okay.
Right. So success of the WSA depends on effective implementation of the act, which has not been very effectively implemented by the government. And I know I'm being recorded, and I know I used to work for them. Enforcement of water laws so that people know that the government is serious. I don't think enforcement has been a big deal either. And increased citizen awareness about water rights, which we're really, frankly, a water rights illiterate society right now. And so this is a poster that I developed over the summer. If anybody wants it, come contact me, to raise awareness to landowners that despite the fact that the act hasn't been well implemented, it's in your best interest to apply for that license to get your seniority recognized if you're non-domestic. If you're interested in groundwater, there's a book called Canada's Groundwater Resources, and I'll probably forward this to you, to Bob. It's got a link where you can order it, or the other thing you can do if you're interested is just go, the province has done a really good job putting a lot of information on the internet. So if you can go down to wherever you live and call up your aquifers and call up your wells, you can look things up, right? So if you lived, I don't know, if you lived, this might give you guys a bit of a headache, but if you live near East Sioux Park and you lived on that property, you can actually look up your, you know, whether your well's registered with the province or not. You could click on this aquifer here, the purple polygon, they'll tell you it's aquifer 606. That's the Machosen aquifer that covers a large area, right? And so on. So you could explore through the internet all the different aquifers all up and down the coast of Vancouver Island, right? And notice all the aquifers are identified along the coast. There are none here. That's because there's no data here, right? So usually the aquifers are identified where there's well records and geologic mapping. There's no well records up here. So, and you can see there are other aquifers along the Cowichan River. But this is the lower Cowichan aquifer right there, right? Let me see if there's anything else with the PowerPoint. So takeaways. I think groundwater is vital as a supply. It's a key to the economic and environmental well-being of our province, but it's often water and groundwater is a resource that's completely ignored. It's a common pool resource. It's administered by the government. There's a variety of aquifers that exist on southern Vancouver Island. Accessing and monitoring, assessing and monitoring groundwater allows us to better understand it, to efficiently and effectively manage its use. Licensing of groundwater use under the WSA or Water Sustainability Act is a key to achieving these sustainability goals, which are good for humans as well as fish. But it needs effective implementation, enforcement, and increased citizen awareness about water rights. That's it. That's who I am. I don't think I included my email address, but I think Bob probably has it.
Yes, I do. Yeah. No, that was a very good talk, Mike. I think we've all learned, as you say, most of the public don't know much about groundwater and, you know, where it comes from and resources. So I think we've all learned a lot from your talk.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. Shall I stop sharing? And if you guys, or if you have questions, I'm willing to answer it.
One more. I hate to keep taking up your time, Mike, but for one, I'm on a well in Saanich. My well is 100 feet deep. My neighbor's well, 200 feet away, is 350 feet deep. If we're both on groundwater, how does that work?
Well, if you ever drive by any road cut at all near your area, and you stop beside that rock road cut and you see all these cracks in the rocks, the fractures, none of them are horizontal, right? Some are dipping this way, some are dipping that way. So if your neighbor, if you hit a water-bearing fracture at 100 feet and you have enough water for your use, the driller's not going to drill any deeper, right? And then if you step over to a couple of parcels over, and let's say your water-bearing fracture is dipping, well, they might have to go 300 feet in order to get that fracture, right? Or they may need more water, in which case they get your fracture and they might need another fracture to get more water out of the well. So especially in fractured rock, you'll find people go, yeah, mine's only 40 feet deep, yours is only 50. In Machosen, in that volcanic, you have to go 600, 700, 800 feet deep to get half a gallon an hour or half a gallon a minute.
Wow.
But around one of the areas where there's sandstone, they only have to go 10 or 20 feet down and they're hitting fractures. So it really depends.
Right.
So if you stop screen share, we can all see everybody.
Yep.
There you go.
Mike, what has been the effect of deforestation?
Effective deforestation has, well, if you think about cutting all the logs, so you don't have the trees transpiring water, right? And so there's more water available. Snow melts faster in those cleared areas. And so you get generally greater runoff, but a lot of that goes into the stream, right? And you do get in places rises in groundwater levels, right? But I think, so you do get some benefit out of it, but you also get a lot of impacts out of it. Like, you know, you probably know that coho and steelhead rear in the stream, whereas other forms of salmon, as soon as they hatch, they're like out, they're like going out, right? So habitat loss has wreaked havoc on steelhead and cohos, and maybe less so on some of the other species, right? Because they do spend a lot of time in the rivers before they head out. So it hasn't been great. And so in BC, we're always challenged with natural resource development and stream or groundwater protection, right? And when you look at it historically, and I'm being pretty frank with you here, you know, you have a ministry devoted to forest, you have a ministry devoted to mines, you have an oil and gas commission, and an environment is really it. And really, the powerful ministers are not traditionally in the environment ministry. They're in finance, attorney general, health, energy and mines, right? And so it's always been a bit of a balance, government trying to balance between resource extraction, which is what our province historically has really been all about, right? And resource protection.
So Mike, how important is it, the trend in development now is to put groundwater gardens in so that the runoff goes into the ground? How important is that, do you think?
I think local governments are recognizing that having pavement isn't necessarily a good thing, but a necessary thing. So a lot of governments now have requirements where you, yeah, you can have pavement, but you got to return that water into the ground or into the swales. So there's a lot of urban design, like designing of operations that are more consider the hydrograph and trying to not alter the hydrograph too much, right? So that's been a step positive with local government, particularly, you know, Lower Mainland, Victoria areas, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess, is there any other questions for Mike? Okay, well, thanks very much, Mike. That was very informative.
Great talk. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And who's the person's name that went beach fishing? Derek?
Dennis Skidney.
Dennis, that's
Are you
me.
still there, Dennis?
Yeah, still here. Yeah, give me a shout. My telephone number